Welcome to TM Broadcasting. We are coming to you live from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen. Tonight, Sasha Suter and I will interview two very special guests, Dr. Len Ber and Richard Lighthouse. Now, if you would like to call in and listen, dial +1 518 801-1318. If you would like to call in and ask a question, dial +1 617-987-8603. Over to you, Sashi.
Good evening, fellow citizens. I'm very happy to be here this evening in such illustrious company. On behalf of the Allen Institute for Human Rights, I'd like to reach out to everybody. We are a non-profit providing essential support and information relating to the abuse of advanced technologies upon innocent people and civilians all around the world. Please help us with our mission to raise awareness and keep the information coming that you need about technologies that are able to hack your mind and make your life a very difficult place to navigate. You can find more information on our official website, https://targetedmassachusetts.org, and you can also find payment details for the P.O. Box 193, North Pembroke, MA 02358. All of that information is on the Facebook Targeted Massachusetts site and targetedmassachusetts.org. Anything that you can give us, $1, $5, $100 and more, we would be so grateful to receive your support so we can continue to support you. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you, Sasha. Right now, I would like to give the floor to a friend and a fellow combatant in this war that has befallen our nation. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Sasha. I wanted to give a brief introduction to Targeted Justice for those that may not know about us. Targeted Justice is a nonprofit organization based in Texas. We are the largest TI support group in the world at present. We do have monthly meetings in Houston, and you can find out more about those on our website at targetedjustice.com. We have a newsletter that we put out. We've got a number of groups that are subsidiary to our main group, and you can find out the locations of some of those meetings at our newsletter if you want to sign up for our newsletter. Basically, we are working on a lawsuit. That's the main driver of our organization, but we're also trying to raise awareness and educate the public and public legislators. So we welcome your support. Please visit our website at targetedjustice.com. That's my brief introduction. We are very fortunate to have Len Ber, who recently joined our advisory board. On our advisory board now, we've got 3 medical doctors, and including one on our board, 3 attorneys, as well as a former assistant police chief, and most recently, a former FBI special agent. So we are becoming better equipped to credibly address the legal and technical issues that meet the targeted individual community. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to introduce Len Ber. He's got an incredible story and background, and I encourage you all to ask questions and call in the number that Frank mentioned. You'll have opportunity to ask questions. So, Len, I'll turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself.
Thank you for this introduction. And great to be on your show. I've been listening to it for a while, and it is the quality of information that you put out is just incredible. I'm very honored to join the advisory board of TargetedJustice.com. There's the group of people, the caliber, the quality of knowledge is truly incredible, and I want to be hopeful that this is all our suffering is not for nothing, even though it might look like we don't have a path forward, but we just need to keep fighting and keep moving in the right direction. And one of these directions is educating public, educating legislators. I am very much of an opinion that directed energy weapons and what has been colloquially known as the Havana Syndrome is a public health issue because general public suffers from it, and that has been downplayed a lot. We all know there's an acknowledgement now from leading experts in neuroweapons that regular civilians have been diagnosed, have been suffering, and their brain has been damaged. So it is, to me, is a public. It's not some obscure foreign diplomats that at obscure location in the foreign countries. No, it is happening right now with members of the general public, and so public health issue. That's what I'm putting forward in every tweet, in every communication, in every interview I get. So let me give you a little bit of my own background. I grew up in the former USSR, where I received my medical degree, specialized in endocrinology, practiced for about 8 years, and then had an opportunity in the early 90s. I had an opportunity to move here on H-1B visa to work for a pharmaceutical company, actually in Houston, Richard, out of all the places. So, and I stayed, obtained everything legally, green card, became a naturalized U.S. citizen, never went back to practice, even though my degree is recognized. After several research positions, I got involved in the regulatory field, and this is where I am now. I live in the Chicago area, work for a large food company, and in the regulatory field. In the summer of 2019, strange things started happening to me, and we all know what these things are. Started experiencing V2K, high pitch tinnitus, very high pitch, like electronic buzz, and vibration. I could not understand where. I would around the house. I would ask, "Can you feel this? Can you feel this?" Like my head is vibrating, my body is vibrating, and it's very unpleasant, and nobody could feel anything around me. And then it was getting more severe and severe and escalated to the point that in December I had full body convulsions from these vibrations, and never lost consciousness. So it was not an epilepsy, but it very disoriented, lost balance, ended up in ER. They didn't find anything besides elevated calcium, which is actually a one of the signs of directed energy attacks. That's because it knocks out calcium out of the neuronal synapses. So calcium gets in the blood, and so it's elevated. Then took a month of work to do all the tests, like to see what's going on. I, basically working with my neurologist and with my psychiatrist. I know this is a very controversial topic that, under no circumstances go to a psychiatrist, but I did. My psychiatrist completely rejected, and we discussed everything. I had to educate him, but based on my complaints and the fact that I was 54 at the moment, it started. He absolutely declined any delusional disorder, and he rejected, diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. And so what my diagnosis with a psychiatrist is adjustment disorder. So, when something happens to people go through divorce, people go through some, loss of relatives, their psychological sort of system adjusts to it. So my diagnosis, adjustment disorder, it emphasizes that whatever's happening with me, I'm adjusting to these attacks. So having that diagnosis sort of in my back pocket allowed me to speak freely about what's going on. And basically everybody was very, very puzzled. I of course had to know the answer, what's going on, and I researched the topic and stumbled upon the whole Havana Syndrome with the U.S. Embassy and Dr. Hoffer, who examined these patients, diagnosed them, and published a paper. This is the classic in 2018, and this is the work he did for Department of State. He called it acquired neurosensory dysfunction, but it's basically, when you read, he's talking about Havana Syndrome, he's talking about directed energy, and he describes this as a form of concussion, concussion is a mechanical brain injury. So it's a brain injury with a very specific vestibular damage. And so that made him think that this is something new. This is something that nobody has ever seen before. These attacks with vibrations, with sound, people get dizzy, lose balance, completely disoriented, and then you can see the signs of concussion, but you can also find new vestibular abnormalities that just a regular concussion would not get. And so he called it acquired neurosensory dysfunction. We know it as the Havana Syndrome. The government calls it anomalous health incident. And I went to Miami, made an appointment with Dr. Hoffer, spent the whole day doing vestibular tests and communicating with him, and he gave me the same diagnosis that he gave to U.S. Embassy personnel. And when I asked him, what can I do about it? He said, well, try vestibular rehab and try to contact Dr. Giordano, the Georgetown neuroethicist that we all know. I tried vestibular rehab. It did not work because whatever compensatory gains you achieve, they get wiped out with the very next attack. And my attacks are a daily occurrence. So sometimes, several times a day, there's a level of vibration that I can feel pretty much all the time. But it's very debilitating. I started with memory. It started hard for me to work. Completely, like all the time in the mental fog. So I decided I need to go on the medical leave. And so my local neurologist added to that diagnosis traumatic encephalopathy. So so when I went on the medical leave 6 months ago, and I will stay on it for the rest of the year, my full diagnosis is traumatic brain syndrome and vestibular disorder due to exposure to directed energy, also known as Havana Syndrome. This is where I am at right now. But going back to summer of 2020, when I just received the diagnosis from Dr. Hoffer, I contacted every elected official, everybody, from the police to basically everybody. I knocked on every door. And to my surprise, I wrote a letter to several senators. To my surprise, my U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth responded and assigned me a caseworker. So I have a case open at the senator's office. She wrote an inquiry letter to the FBI, and she received a letter back about my case. And she received the letter back from the FBI that is basically sweeping my case under the rug. They basically refused to investigate it. So my caseworker at the senator's office is still working, trying to reach every organization that is dealing with Havana Syndrome, and it's been determined because I'm a private citizen and it's happening to be domestically. FBI is the only organization with the jurisdiction to investigate it, and they completely ignore it, even after a letter, after an inquiry from my U.S. senator. So this is my story in a nutshell. Today is another day. I get attacked. I recover. I go to sleep, medicate heavily so I can get some sleep. Otherwise, I can't function. And that's what my everyday looks like.
It's interesting that the government has reached out to us with a questionnaire. And I was curious as to whether you did fill out this questionnaire.
Yes, that was a questionnaire sent out by Department of State. I filled it out. I sent it in. I received a response that this is not because you are not a federal employee. We're not going to investigate it, but the FBI, we recommend you contact the FBI. And I forwarded that to the FBI and filed another complaint. I filed over the course of the last 2 years, I filed 3 complaints with the FBI. And once again, there's no response. There's no investigation.
Okay, what you may not understand is when the FBI has a case, they don't necessarily call you up every day to tell you how they're doing. They are working in the background. Of course, you know, we have FBI victims of Havana Syndrome. We have CIA victims of Havana Syndrome. We have in Vietnam, when the vice president was visiting, there was an instance of Havana Syndrome at that particular point in time as well. So this is then snowballed, and now it is all over the world, and they are trying to put a lid on it, but the lid keeps coming off because there are too many of us. And Havana Syndrome relates directly to what every TI has gone through from the beginning. There are things that they don't tell you, such as voice to skull. They don't mention that, or at least they haven't yet.
Well, I mentioned it to both my psychiatrist and to Dr. Hoffer and every neurologist, and I explained how it's possible. I gave them literature. So even though I experienced V2K and they don't talk about it, but it does exist. And just recently, somebody found a clip from the early days of reporting on Havana Syndrome when CNN confirms that part of these sounds that the embassy personnel experienced were human voices.
Exactly, and they can put these voices anywhere in the room, next to a lamp, on the sofa, 50 feet out of a window. This is where these people can operate. And it is an extreme saturation of the area. We had one TI who was a guest, and he said that the signals came down like rain. And I haven't forgotten that, and I use that frequently. And it will be interesting to see at the end of all this what the source actually is. Richard has a number of very educated, published ideas about where this is coming from. And he should not be neglected in terms of his research. He has been researching for many years. And I think we should all thank him for his dedication towards finding an end to this scourge on mankind. Would you like to say a few words, Sasha or Richard?
Richard, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm staying present at this moment, but I think the lead-in from Frank here really puts the spotlight on you in this second. Please speak to us, tell us.
Thanks, Sasha. Targeted Justice is involved with research since December of 2017, actually even prior to that. But our scientific measurements, which we've done through a number of people, we have several experts here in the Houston area that have helped me, and we have repeatedly found that the vast majority of microwave attacks, including the V2K, comes from cell towers. The microwave beams can penetrate. It comes from, the carrier wave is actually called a scalar wave. If you'd like to learn more about that, we have information on our website. I've published a short ebook on scalar wave information and theory, and quoted a number of the experts in the academic fields discussing scalar waves. And the main reason that we know this is scalar waves, and I'll give you some examples. We've had targeted individuals with V2K get under 12 feet of water in a deep water pool, and they still get the V2K. Now, that's not an ordinary electromagnetic wave. The only thing that can penetrate 12 feet of water is a scalar wave. You could, even with high-powered X-rays or gamma rays, could not penetrate 12 feet of water. It's literally impossible. They put skin divers in the swimming pool that surrounds the core of a nuclear reactor. They're the cooling water pool. These skin divers are told one primary thing: stay 6 feet away from the reactor core, and you'll be safe, because 6 feet of water will absorb any and all X-rays and gamma rays that are coming from that nuclear core. And here we have a targeted individual 12 feet underwater, and he's still getting the V2K. That's not an ordinary electromagnetic wave, okay? That's a scalar wave. It has to be a scalar wave. So we've clearly identified the type of wave that it is. It's a very unique wave. And we've identified the source by using antennas that can tell us the direction that something is coming from. And if you go way out in the country where there's no structures or anything around you, and you can identify where the cell towers are, and you go, look, the signal strength is strongest when we point the antenna at the cell tower. Guess where it's coming from? It's coming from the cell tower. This isn't rocket science. So we're very confident that we've identified the source, the type of carrier wave that's being used, and that's very important information that the TI community needs to know about. So that's my short answer.
Okay,
May I reinforce that? I just had a small comment to make that the people targeting me have actually educated me and discussed openly that they were using scalar waves, or the device was delivering scalar waves into my body.
Okay, can I interject one thing? Quantum communication has come up in terms of research, and a quantum communication exists when one photon is released at a time. And today, a squid, you don't need to have liquid nitrogen to freeze this so that you can emit one photon. So now we have a squid, a room temperature squid, and they are using this to communicate with our submarines. But my actual question is, what do you think they used before cell phones and cell towers and what have you?
That's a good question, Frank. We have a TI that's a part of our membership at Targeted Justice. His name is Norman Rabin, and I don't want to try to speak for him, but I will let him correct me if I've misunderstood what he has shared. But he first started getting attacked on the top of his head in 1985. That was long before there was any cell tower network. There were small local networks of cell towers that were being tested at that time, but it was unheard. It was generally unheard. If you knew somebody that had a cell phone in 1985, they were probably somebody working for the government or somebody working for a big corporation on research. So he was clearly getting hit on the top of the head. It was very painful. He traveled from outside New York City, where he lives, to large areas all around New England, and he was still getting hit. He deduced very quickly, this has to be a satellite. They didn't have drones that could target people in 1985. They didn't exist. Well, I should say, there may have been some in theory, but as a practical matter, there were not drones flying 24 hours a day that could hit you anywhere in New England. That was certainly not the case. So he deduced correctly, it's coming from satellites. There's another individual, Harlan Gerard, who did a very important interview back in, I think, 2007 approximately. And that was with, I think it was either with the Washington Times or the Atlantic Monthly. But if you look it up, in a long interview that he did, we've got it listed under our latest news on targetjustice.com, but you can find that interview. He described how he first started getting attacked in 1984 and also deduced it was coming from satellites. And he was a man of means, a fairly affluent gentleman, and tried to use his resources to try to shut it down or track it down. Unfortunately, most people just told him he was crazy. So we have a long history. If you go to the timeline, we have under our technology tab, there's a tab called the timeline, and you'll see that starting in 1957, this is unheard of. Most TIs don't even know about this. In 1957, there's a gentleman that wrote a book, a fictional book, that was based on his true life events on a ship at sea where he started receiving voice to skull in 1957. So I encourage you to look that up. So clearly the research was happening and the British government was involved in it. This was before an academic person in the United States did some research in the early 1960s, and his name was Dr. Allen, and it was called for many years. It was called I should say Dr. Fry. It was called the Fry effect, and this was before people called it voice to skull, and some of the other names it's been called, but. In the early 1960s, there was a gentleman called Dr. Fry who did some high-quality research and identified this as a capability. But even before then, we have evidence that a book was published under a science fiction misnomer. And the individual, I don't recall his name off the top of my head, but it is. We have a tab on it. Under Voice to Skull on targetjustice.com that's got all the information if you're interested.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. I would just like to pause briefly and tell the public that this is TM Broadcasting. We are coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. If you would like to call in and listen, the number is 518-801-1318. If you'd like to call in to ask a question, the phone number is 1-617-987-8603. Thank you very much. And Sasha, did you want to speak? Okay. Go ahead, Richard.
No, I just want to try to answer that question because it's the reason it's a good question is because we get that all the time. We want people to understand the primary method and the technology when they're getting hit with the microwave attacks. The number I like to use is more than 90% of your attacks come from cell towers. Unfortunately, there's many in the TI community that are misled to believe that their neighbors have a microwave weapon, and at Targeted Justice, we disagree for a number of reasons. Number one, the There's no such thing as a portable microwave weapon. It requires, there's lots of pictures on the internet, and we get this all the time from people, and we have to kindly and politely tell them that's a plastic toy. That's there is no pointing method or system with a handheld microwave weapon that can follow you around the house and precisely hit a single point on your body while you're moving around or running or dancing and still hit the same point. There's no pointing system from your next door neighbor that can hit that exact point 24 hours a day. It's not your neighbor with a handheld mechanism of any kind. That's literally impossible. This also takes a huge amount of electricity to fire a microwave beam weapon. Let me be very specific about that. A microwave beam weapon that produces a laser-like beam. I've got the burns on my hand and on my back that will prove it. It is a beam weapon. And many targeted individuals have described it the exact same way. It is definitely a beam weapon. You can disassemble a microwave oven and hold it up in the air, and the microwaves that are emitted from the cavity device that exists in there will emit microwaves that will spread out like a funnel. It's not a beam. It spreads out over large areas, and after about 20 feet, it's almost immeasurable. So it dissipates so quickly as to be useless as any type of weapon. And we're gonna get feedback on this, and people are gonna say, "Oh, no, it's my neighbor." Yes, we understand. That's the setup. That's the CIA and the U.S. Space Force that operate many of these weapons don't want you to blame them. They want you to blame your neighbor, because you can go to court all day long and you will never find a tracking microwave beam weapon that your neighbors possess, because they don't have one. The only people that are allowed to operate one have a top secret clearance, and they were trained and primarily work at Schriever Space Force Base near Colorado Springs in Colorado. So we've identified the groups that are involved. We've identified the technology. We have identified the source of the microwave weapons, and we want the TI community to do the research and check for themselves. If you try to sue your neighbors in court, you're going to end up looking very foolish. They do not own or operate microwave beam weapons. So I hope that's a short summary.
Yes, sir. Doctor, just in my personal experience, because I have experienced many different types of EM radiation over the years that I've been targeted, and not to dispute anything that you say, but there are other directed energy weapons that use low frequency and pulses that I've experienced have been constructed in order to scare me, primarily prime me for the attack, and then they have attacked me. When I've been living in a property that had an Airbnb community as such. So not disputing what you say, but there are a plethora of EM weapons. I agree with you. It's very easy for people to believe that their neighbours are involved, but then I don't believe that they are necessarily when it comes to these EM attacks. But I personally have experienced technology over these 24 years that would definitively prove to me that there are not only satellite cell tower, but also other modalities of equipment if the people perpetrating have the right connections and are working within a specific field of medical military or the medical military domain, let's put it like that. Does that make sense to you?
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think Len has emphasized that he can certainly speak to the physiological effects and the medical effects, and that is certainly not an area of my expertise. I have a master's degree in engineering from Stanford University, and I try to approach it as the people that design these weapon systems are engineers, and so I'm trying to use my engineering background to identify where and who and what is behind these attacks.
Okay.
Richard,
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
do we have a couple of minutes for comments and questions for me? Hi, Richard.
Go right ahead.
I have an observation because my attacks are so noticeable because it makes me vibrate. It's a very distinct feeling, and it attacks me at any location, anywhere, in any state. Travel around. They haven't traveled internationally, but I understand that's the case also. But if I get in the car and drive at least maybe like 65 miles an hour, vibrations disappear. Do you have any comments regarding that?
I have. That's an interesting question, and here, I think people that understand or appreciate some of the technology developments that are happening right now will appreciate this answer. So, if I'm driving in my truck on the freeway at 65 miles an hour and make a rapid lane change, I also know the tracking signal on the top of my head dissipates because the way the satellite tracking system works, it's very good. It was designed as part of the Strategic Defense Initiative. And my proof for that is in a technical paper written and published by the engineers at the Titan Corporation. That technical paper is available on our website. It's available on the homepage. It's also available under our key evidence section. In the references, in the reference section and under the pictures, it literally references, we built these weapons under the SDIO organization. That stands for Strategic Defense Initiative Organization. They literally admit that they built this under President Reagan's Star Wars program. That system was literally designed to detect and track missiles traveling at 10,000 miles an hour. And those missiles don't move sideways very quickly. They're very good at tracking them while they're moving at a very high velocity in one direction. And so they optimize these tracking satellites to function so that they can track linear changes and linear velocities. When it moves side to side, the satellites aren't able to track that very well. So what did Russia recently do? They came up, they're fully aware of the capabilities and the vulnerabilities and weaknesses of these GPS tracking satellites. So they built a hypersonic weapon system that literally moves side to side continuously, making it very difficult to track. These hypersonic weapons travel at Mach 5 plus. And the reason they can evade the U.S. Defense Department's defenses is because they move side to side very quickly and repeatedly and continuously. And the tracking system can't track them. That's why it becomes a very serious threat as a strategic weapon. So the answer to your question is, the way the tracking satellites work, they're very weak at tracking side-to-side movements. I can't specifically address why they would dissipate simply because you're driving on the freeway, but I have also noticed when I'm traveling on the freeway, if I move a rapid lane change, the tracking signal loses track of me very briefly, and then it'll try to pick it up again. But it's interesting that the Russians have come up with a weapon system that takes advantage of that weakness. So I encourage you to look that up under Aviation Week in Space Technology. They've got some of the latest information on these hypersonic weapons that are deliberately designed to evade the Lockheed GPS satellite tracking. Well, that's my short answer.
That makes sense. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay, would anybody like to present? Len, you have much information to share, and we are going to get it. If you'd like to bring forth any more information, it sure would be welcome.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's definitely one aspect I want to address. A lot of PIs also went to Dr. Hofford to receive Havana Syndrome diagnosis, and some of them I know. I know Dr. Hoffer actually told me that he diagnosed other civilians. He just could not disclose it because of the confidentiality. But then there's some TIs that went and did not receive the diagnosis. But Dr. Hoffer would acknowledge that it's still directed energy. It still has the pattern of damage is still the one that he found in Havana Syndrome patients. He just defines it by the severity of vestibular damage. So it's usually a unilateral damage, like one side more than the other. And his criteria is there has to be at least 32% difference between the sides in that pattern. So if your damage is 30%, but in the same pattern, you don't receive the diagnosis of Havana syndrome, but you receive a diagnosis of vestibular disorder, likely due to directed energy exposure. And I know some TIs are very upset about it. And I say, lucky you. I mean, like one of my vestibular or like in the up and down axis on the right side is 100% damaged. It's irreversible. It's destroyed. So I want just to clear that for all the people who sort of sought the diagnosis and did not receive it. Does it make sense?
Yes, it surely does. We have many people in the U.S. and England who have sought a diagnosis. And in the U.S., several have got a diagnosis, and it was thrown out of court as not respected. And I think your diagnosis will be respected. And that's the difference. The government has named this Havana Syndrome. If they call it fried onions, that's what I'm going to call it. But in this case, I believe that getting this diagnosed as Havana Syndrome is the first step to combating this, because they obviously have not recognized us for many, many years. If you look at the explanation of a TI, it is most disturbing if you look in Wikipedia. But yes, to be diagnosed with Havana Syndrome is the best thing that you can do. And with your...
If I can... Sorry, Frank.
That's okay. No, not a problem. I thought that Len could probably guide us possibly in the right direction towards the proper doctors. It was my understanding that Dr. Hoffer was not seeing TIs anymore. Now, if that's not the case, please let me know, because there are many people who would like to go see Dr. Hoffer, but we had one woman try and bring a suit against him for some reason. Go ahead.
I just spoke with a woman who went to see him literally yesterday, and this is the conversation that we had. He said, yes, you have directed energy damage, but it's not to the level of what we classify as Havana Syndrome. They have more severe vestibular damage, and yours is in the same pattern. It just does not that's the latest. That's literally from my conversation yesterday.
Okay, so they're trying to establish a difference between Havana Syndrome and what TIs have. Am I correct?
And I think the umbrella. I mean, TI is such a multidimensional thing that when I wrote a letter to the senators and when I only write about what I have evidence for. And yes, I do consider myself a TI because I have all the things, the organized stalking and the V2K and directed energy. But what I specifically have evidence for is for brain damage by directed energy, and that's what I'm speaking about because I don't want to speculate. I don't want to lessen the credibility of my case. And that's exactly what other people should be doing. Try not to speculate, but bring evidence. And my evidence is vestibular damage in the pattern that was detected in the Cuban embassy, U.S. embassy personnel.
Okay, yeah, I reviewed the same findings. I believe that you have reviewed, in that it shows up with concussion. And this is one of Dr. Hoffer's specialties, and that is concussion. And I believe he headed the team originally to learn the cause or learn the signs or diagnosis of Havana Syndrome. So it's...
Yeah. The sort of the concussion-like brain damages, they were mostly investigated by the team at the University of Pennsylvania, and he collaborated with them. Dr. Hoffer is neurologist, so ear and neurology, but that includes inner ear, vestibular organs, that sort of things. And this is how he based his diagnosis. Then we have a team at the University of Pennsylvania that did that special type of functional MRI called DTI, stands for diffusion tensor imaging, that is much more precise, and it shows connectivity between the regions of the brain. And they showed that exposure to this energy rearranges brain's connectivity. And this is not the only method that you can show it on. There is a form of EEG, electroencephalogram, that's called quantitative EEG or QEEG. And if in MRI you shoot particles like protons, and then you receive an image. In electroencephalogram, you record brain electric activity, and it's measured in like 27 or in multiple locations, and then the software generates the image, and you can see how connectivity between different parts of the brain looks like. So it is imaging using brain's own electric activity. And I just found a specialist here in Chicago. I did the QEEG. I am waiting for the report. But what he showed me is, he said there's a lot of broken connectivity in your brain, and that's exactly what University of Pennsylvania study showed, just using fMRI instead of QEEG. So that's another venue that people can find. Don't do just regular EEG. Take QEEG, quantitative electroencephalogram.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Richard, would you like to add to that? Or would you like to ask a question, Sasha? I think you have several questions there that you need to get out. I can hear.
I just wanted to clarify, actually, what I said to you, Richard. Because I'm such an old TI, what I was first experienced was low-frequency weapons and then ultrasound weapons. So just to get some clarification. And then in later years, I experienced some other weaponry. But I just wanted to support exactly what you were saying about it definitely coming from cell towers with regards to the scalar waves. I wasn't contradicting you at all. I was just saying I've had experience with different uses of electromagnetic fields of energy with low frequency and high.
Okay.
I think I understand. Yeah.
No,
I think
go
I
ahead.
understand her point. I think there's certainly a lot of confusion and a lot of information out on the internet, and but that's one of the efforts we're making at Target Justice, to try to narrow down exactly the source of these microwave weapons attacks, how the technology works, and who's behind it. And I'm more than satisfied that we can definitely identify the U.S. Space Force at Schriever Space Force Base.
Please hold.
One of the key pieces of evidence, if you go to the targetjustice.com website, we've got the number 2 tab on there is called Key Evidence. I strongly encourage TIs to read that and use that and share it with your senators and congressmen, your state representatives, your family members. Key pieces of evidence on there that they're very difficult for someone to deny, including sworn affidavits from FBI agents, Dr. Leibowitz's Senate presentation from 2014, the technical document from the Titan Corporation in San Leandro, California, that designed and built the Vertcator weapons. And at the very last thing that we've recently discovered is on LinkedIn, there are 34 people that identify a job description of space weapons officers. This is very important.
Wow.
These guys actually admit to operating electromagnetic weapons in space. Very key. Okay, this is like a confession.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So the Secretary of the Air Force in 2018. Maybe it was earlier than that. I'll have to go back and get that exact, but it's on our website under our latest news. If you care to look it up, we have the secretary. It was a woman that was the Secretary of the Air Force, who very plainly stated to 60 Minutes news crew, the U.S. Space Force had no weapons whatsoever in orbit. And this is directly contradicted by 34 space weapons officers who say they are officers in the Space Force and that they are trained to use weapons in orbit. So it's unfortunate that Space Force and their executives are not willing to abide by the 1967 Outer Space Treaty that prohibits weapons of mass destruction. And the ability to attack millions of people all over the earth at the same time, I would call that a weapon of mass destruction. So It's clear that the United States is in violation of the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, and it's clear that these space weapons officers are admitting that it's happening on a daily basis. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, when I've looked at the satellites that I know have been responsible for some of my targeting, and they correlate. Frank was able to pass this over to me last week, and it was a big moment for me. And I saw directly that the military and the government are responsible for those satellites. And so that was a bit of a watershed moment for me. But I will have a look at these space weapon admissions by these officers in the latest news with great interest. Thank you so much. Information is power, right? The more that we understand, the better.
Yes, absolutely. I agree, Sasha.
Yes, thank you, Sasha. We should move along into, I would think, where do we go from here? Richard, what do you think we should do? Len has a diagnosis. Now we have to get other people to doctors to get this same diagnosis. Or if not the same diagnosis, a diagnosis. Although the power is different, it cannot be that much different. I think we continually run into brick walls, even where there is a window, and they are keeping that window from us. And we must. But where do you think that we're going to go from here, Richard?
That's a very good question, Frank. It's very encouraging to meet people like Len that are willing to have the courage to come forward and openly state what's going on with them, as many in the TI community have done. We need more people to come forward. We still think we're getting a very small percentage of the people that are actually being targeted. There's so many people out there that are afraid to come forward. If you're one of those people and you're listening, please don't be shy about coming forward. Join a group. There are many groups. Frank's got conference calls every day. Join some of these groups, meet some of these people, go to the meetings. We've got a number of them listed at Targeted Justice. We've got a list or a tab called Contacts and Organizations. You can reach out to people there. Most of the major cities have TI groups that meet. So you're not going to solve it by yourself. Get with a group and get a group behind you. That's what scares the deep state, is when you're functioning as a group. It's very hard to discredit you when you're 5 people in a group telling the FBI, this is real and you need to investigate it. When you go by yourself, they love to just say you're crazy and dismiss it. Go as a group. If you can get a group together that can... Sure.
Yeah, please continue. I didn't mean to cut across you. I thought you were pausing for a second. Forgive me.
No, it's okay. We just really... I'm sorry, go ahead.
The question was about the burn marks and the indisputable loss of lipids and fats that we can experience during the night. Photographic evidence, as well as times and details, important to each target to collect, right, so that we can present like a diary of all of the incremental burnings that we're experiencing. Would you say that, so that we can present it at one point to the Senate and any of the people that are supporting the fact that this technology actually exists and is being abused by corporations and by military organizations?
I do feel like that's a good idea. I'd like to hear Len's thoughts on it. Keeping a diary, you don't have to keep it permanently, but if you keep it for a week or a month and document the times that you can, a spiral notebook that the pages are numbered and dated is a valid piece of evidence for a courtroom. So if you get a spiral notebook, an ordinary spiral notebook you get from Walmart, take it home and start documenting every time that you get, where you get hit, what time of day it is, give it an intensity rating of 1 through 10, and as much description as you need, and document just how much and when you're being attacked. That's a piece of evidence you can use in courtroom. That is certainly helpful. What do you think, Len?
I think there's a power in documenting things personally. It's your written testimonial. It definitely has a great value. What I'm afraid is that in whatever evidence we produce will be looked at as bias. So that's why I think that the official investigation, not only by the proper agency, but also with congressional oversight. So everything is transparent. There might be things confidential, but now we're talking about public health issue. You can't keep things from the public that endangers the public. That's why I was so disappointed when the joint DNI CIA executive summary declassified version was released in February of this year, and it had a section on detectors, and the only word that you could read in that section was detectors. Everything else was still classified. So there's a whole section how to detect, and they don't want the public to know. But if it's a public health issue, you can't keep it from public. So official investigation with congressional oversight, that's what I'm shooting for, because unfortunately, I don't believe they would accept our evidence because we are a biased party.
Can I just ask one more question? You may have already answered it, forgive me, but I have substantial burns and marks appearing, disfiguring me. My face, underneath my eyes, around my mouth, my arms, my legs, my belly. I've got an electrical sterilization scar. I was informed that that's what it was, over my womb. I've got multiple marks on my head and face that I wake up. So I photograph them one day, and the next day I wake up and I've got sometimes swelling, black eye. You don't think that evidence, even though you consider it Photoshop, is admissible?
This is great evidence, but if you got burns and you documented them yourself, what is the diagnosis? What is the nature of these burns? Get to a doctor who thinks outside the box, who doesn't just push pills, who really thinks, who has a modern level of thinking and knowledge. That's when you get the right diagnosis. Because most of the doctors that I've encountered, they say, I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know what it is. I cannot help you. Well,
and could I push you for one more thing? I understand what you're saying. But how does one find a doctor? I've been told years ago by my doctor that the cortisol levels that were elicited from the amount of infrasound that I was experiencing were creating huge amounts of cortisol, and you cannot test for cortisol, but what you can test for within blood tests are sodium and potassium indicators, high levels of them. And then subsequently, I was speaking to Barry Trower, who used to work for the intelligence agencies in England and has been very forthright and open about microwave weapons during the 60s and 70s. And they were conversations that were had openly, and then suddenly it went silent. But during a big protest down in Greenham Commons for nuclear weapons against the Americans, people, women in particular, were being targeted. And he shares all of this. He's a great, if you've never heard of Barry Trower, he's someone really interesting to look at. But he told me also about a new blood test that had been developed in France by a doctor that showed radiation within the blood. But I haven't been able to contact him because he's not available on electronic means, only through his telephone. And I haven't been able to find that test out. So I was always eager to find tests that would validate that my body was being exposed to radiation. If you have any information about other tests that I might be able to do to add to my court bundle, I would be so grateful.
You asking about? I didn't catch everything in your question. You saying you have burns, but you don't have a doctor who would explain to you how these burns occurred? Is that the culprit?
No. My question was to you whether you could share any sympathetic doctor, because they are few on the ground. But what my questions were, from information that I had gathered from people who'd worked in the intelligence agencies within England, were that there were blood tests that would show that a human body, had been exposed to radiation. So one of the blood tests would be high levels to demonstrate cortisol. High levels of cortisol can be indicated by potassium and sodium levels. I was then told by another doctor that there is, by Barry Trower, who worked for the British government, that there was a doctor in France who had developed a blood test that would show the impact of the radiation on human blood. I wondered if you had heard of any blood test that would do the same.
No, unfortunately, I haven't heard of this doctor in France. I'm following the literature. It's constantly being published. We recently saw a publication that shows how pulsed microwaves damage the brain through formation of these vibrating particles called phonons. So there are people studying this effect. Of course, you will not be able to study it in humans because no IRB, no institutional review board would ever approve to use something so damaging on humans. Otherwise, we would know already. We would expose people to this energy and then look at their brains and say, yep, that's the connection between this kind of energy produces this kind of damage.
Okay.
Very good, thank you. This syndrome, I think that I will stick with syndrome. Many people say that it's a different program, but people fail to realize that it's the same program, but you are in a different spot on the timeline. I bring that up a lot, and people are starting to grasp that. You can't start at the end, or the perps will not get anywhere. There is much preparation that needs to be done to get to, we'll say, phase 5, which is where I think I am. Phase 1 being initial contact, and that's where they start learning about you and filling up their hard drive with information every time you make a phone call, every time someone texts you, every time you read a book. It's all cataloged on a drive. And the second phase, I think, is initial severe attacks, simply to scare the hell out of you if they can. So they've reached that point, and they haven't done so. So the third is the beginning of mind games. And that's relating a movie with a person, relating a song to another song, and then a person, or a dictionary definition to a song. Everything is related so that they can hit one key and pull up everything on that one relation. And I would call the fourth intense mind games with intense attacks. They will pick a time when you are hungry, thirsty, perhaps low on blood sugar, which is what they like to pick. And you might be angry, but that's the time they will pick on you. And I would say 5 is extreme mind games and extreme detail. They go into great detail about everything. Details about, you might as well be talking about grains of sugar or grains of salt. And they try and drive you crazy with details. And they flood your mind with these details. And they continue. So, if this is phase 5, well, I guess I'm in it because I am getting mind games nonstop, much in the same respect and the same way that Marilyn Page and Sasha get the mind games. And I still swear by Dave Case's CD. I play it on an old laptop during the night, sometimes all night long, and I play it with headphones, depending upon the severity of what they've done. So I'm in a private war here that's actually part of the whole dynamic. So there are perps all over the world. There are Havana Syndrome victims all over the world. And we have to come up with coping strategies. Mine is to stay as close to the middle between anger and despair. Close to the middle is where you can survive. If you get angry, they'll take advantage of it. If you get too sullen, they will break you in half with that. So you have to be strong. And when you find yourself weakening, call Richard, call myself, call Sasha, and maybe Len if he is so inclined. But we have to develop a way for us to all stick together so that we don't lose anyone. I really...
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Sasha.
Yes, sir. Well, God bless you all.
Okay, it's 7:21. I think I'm going to take the bottom of the hour a little early. And welcome to TM Broadcasting. My name is Frank Allen. And tonight we are interviewing Dr. Len Ber and Richard Lighthouse. If you'd like to call in to listen, the number is 518-801-1318. If you'd like to ask a question, dial 1-617-987-8603. Okay. Sasha, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, sir. Well, not to be a dog with a bone, but I would love to come back to Senor Len Ber and ask him if the doctor that he has been in communication with is open to seeing everyday people who aren't fellow doctors. Is he a personal friend of yours? Is he brave enough to discreetly work with people that are experiencing the phenomena that we are?
My primary care physician is not familiar with this, only through what I've been educating him with. But this is the doctor that took other experts' diagnosis, and I had to go through my primary care physician in order to obtain the to go on medical leave. And I want to emphasize something, that my diagnosis for the medical leave is Havana Syndrome. And an insurance company that doesn't like to pay for made-up diseases accepted it. They're paying money. That type of endorsement, when the actual money is involved, is not to be taken lightly. This is a diagnosis that passes the sniff test. Here's a civilian. Here's his diagnosis, and we will pay for his medical absence with this diagnosis. That is another sort of endorsement that I was personally very impressed to see.
So that's really helpful. Can I just bring you back to the comment that you made about not the functioning MRI, but the other DTI, and ask you on what criteria I could present myself to a doctor, because when I tried to get PET scans and functioning MRIs, I found it very difficult. What would I need to say to any practitioner of medicine that would make him carry out these tests for me on my own behest without a GP who would be biased, and I'd have to explain, and he would minimize me to him saying, okay, yeah, here are the tests. You can do this test now for cow.
Yep. Here's what my typical, trip to a doctor looks like. I bring my diagnosis from the University of Miami. I bring publications. They're all available on PubMed. If you don't know how to search for the literature, I actually published a lot of it. My primary media is Twitter, and I published all these, unless they are not public. You have to pay for that, so that you have to buy those articles. in order um, to honor the copyright. But there are a lot of publications, scientific publications on this topic that are free. I print them out. I bring them to the doctor. I bring the National Academy of Sciences, 70-page report that they published in December of 2020, where they said that the most plausible explanation for this syndrome is directed pulse radio frequency energy in the microwave range. Same conclusion that the intelligence report recently came out. So I bring those publications, and the publication about GTI is in JAMA. It is published. It's been somewhat criticized because it's not like they gave people directed energy and then measured their brain before and after. No, they compared it with the same population of the same age, of the same education level, and they found a statistically significant difference. So as far as methodology, people will criticize, but the bottom line is like every piece of this medical science together strengthens our case. So when I did the DTI, and I went to my neurologist and said I would like to do the DTI for this particular reason because I have this syndrome, and here's a paper that
supports my assertion.
Reports its abnormality. And I convinced the doctor, and we did the DTI. Then when I had the DTI done, I couldn't convince anybody at the University of Pennsylvania to take a look at it, because they said, you're a private citizen, we did that study for Department of State, and we're not going to take on you as a patient. What a discriminatory position they took.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's absolutely, things like that should be front page news. And instead, we're struggling to even convince people that we have this type of brain injury.
I just wanted to, I was looking today at the previous content of you on Twitter, and there was a news presentation from I think it was even Fox News or something very mainstream in America. The only thing that I thought was positive that I could see, apart from you, which was compelling and great, was that we actually had news anchors talking about microwave weapons, which have been in knowledge for decades. It seems so ridiculous that there is this blanketing out of all information around microwave weapons, and we have to keep proving it and be shut down by the medical bodies and the authorities. It just seems incredible now.
Yeah. I had my share of conversations with the doctors that didn't go anywhere, and believe me, that was the most ridiculous conversation. This one neurologist who was recommended as very much thinking outside the box, and very knowledgeable and very well recommended. She told me, I'm not an expert, but I don't think you have Havana Syndrome. You were not even in Havana.
I know.
That,
So I'm laughing here.
that's
That's
the low
so
point.
funny.
Yeah,
Oh my
in my
God.
meeting with practitioners. Yeah.
I guess the next
Wow.
So
time.
you need to find a doctor who is open-minded, informed, who knows that 21st century technology is so much more advanced than an average member of the public thinks. They basically they dismiss it, and this is such a childish behavior to say that yes, we know all these advances. It's probably, but why you? Why would they do this to you? And that's not a fair question, because I'm not the one doing it, but I have evidence of somebody doing it, and a lot of doctors don't seem to get that point.
I agree, and I say this in a very humble way, but for me, what has become elucidated over 24 years is that this is a biotech harvesting of brainwaves and physiological responses. So the question to that is because it's data. If you think about Facebook and all social media sites, the reason that they're so incredibly powerful at this time is because they are collecting, coalescing, and capitalizing on brain data, which is proving the plasticity of the human mind and how easy it is to influence the human mind. And then it doesn't take a huge leap of anybody intelligent to see that the physiological and the mental responses of when you look at from a neuroscience point of view, action potential sites, the reason why people who experience voice to skull are hit with such horrible, debasing, fearful scripts and threats is because it helps the people conducting these experiments illegally without our consent to decode the brain and see the synaptic responses, which is feeding into AI and robotics, which indeed our dear friend and part of the community, Dr. Robert Duncan, has elucidated and spoken about most eloquently, and with inside information, having developed the voice to skull unit in the first place.
Yeah, somebody who denies the existence of this technology is just simply uninformed or willfully ignorant. This is not the existence of this technology is not even a matter of question. It's a lack of imagination for people to imagine that somebody would do this to a regular citizen who doesn't have any, doesn't hold any state secrets, just a regular member of the general public. Why would they do this to you? And this stops them. This kind of denial is very malignant. It's just a very unreasonable way of thinking.
I agree, but if we look to the brave Edward Snowden and what he has shared, risking his own life, as we all do really, by standing up and putting our heads above the pulpit, is that everybody is of interest. And again, Robert Duncan says, because if we look back into the recent history, I think all of us need to armor ourselves by looking at the operations that have been carried out on mind control through the CIA, FBI, etc., etc. And then we can see that There have been personality tests that gave them a huge basis of information about a swathe of our global community. And then we're taking it one step further, or they are right now, with a matrices of all personalities, all sexual orientations, all religious orientations, all backgrounds, every single intrinsic difference that there may be in the people that populate the planet at this time. They have a database of all of that, including physiological responses to fear, including electromagnetic torture, and so it goes on, so that the whole of humanity is held within a grip and it is known, leading us into, and I don't think that you'd be opposed to me bringing this up, like hive mind technology. How can I put this out there to Richard? Richard, are you still with us, sir? What do you feel about some of the things that Robert Duncan has shared about the hive mind and objective of where we're going? Like the whole of humanity loaded up onto a computer interface for the ultimate control system. Do you tally along with that?
That's an interesting question, Sasha. We actually have two targeted individuals that are members of Targeted Justice that have reported at length about what appears to be a hive mind type of technology that's live. My concern with it, and I'm not going to give any names, but my concern is the difficulty in proving it, and it should not be difficult to prove. For example, there is a woman that lives in the Northeast, and she has continuous V2K that involves hundreds of voices, and it's 24 hours a day. She can't shut it off. She can get one of the voices to be louder at times, louder than one of the others, and she thinks she's carrying on a two-way conversation, and she'll say, well, where do you live? What's your last name? And I've encouraged her repeatedly to follow up and try to meet this person. Say, whatever her name is, you can find it through public records, find where they live, go to their house and knock on their door and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and make sure it's a real person. My concern is it's not a real person. It's simply computer-generated voices. And her reluctance to follow up and actually prove that some of these individuals are real people is it could be due to frustration. I don't want to downplay what she's claiming, but we have another individual that lives in the Northeast that said a very similar story, and I've encouraged him to actually try to prove it. Track one of these people down and try to have a live conversation with them. And it just hasn't happened yet. So I'm suspicious that these are computer-generated voices. There's a software program called Adobe Voco, VOCO. I encourage you to look that up. Adobe was planning to sell the software publicly, and apparently the Pentagon said, you're not going to do that. The CIA and the FBI used this software to mimic any voice. It can take a sample of someone's voice. Say, for example, listen in on a phone call, listen to the person's voice, and then duplicate that voice almost exactly so that it's convincing to anybody on the other end that, oh, hey, that's Bob Walton. I know him. So they have the technology to mimic any voice, and they've used this before. So I am concerned about that issue. I'm not sure that it's real yet. I guess that's my short answer.
I completely comprehend. I was actually just coming round to the other side of the conversation again. It was really just to elucidate that your electromagnetic signals from everybody's brain are like a gold rush. They are financing so much in privatized AI applications and apps at this time in our history. Neurological devices, the games that people are playing, using a Neuralink, I think they're just so dangerous because they're giving systolic, physiological, and mental synaptic responses to these companies. I asked somebody who was developing one of those games, one of my clients, what he does with the data. And he just looked at me blankly and he said, I don't know. And I immediately just was like, oh my God, it's like a gold mine for these people and what they can sell on, you know? Anyway, do you understand the point I'm trying to make?
Yeah, I do. I want to give another example that kind of broadens the base of experience. We have a targeted individual here at Houston that comes to our monthly meetings. I'm not going to give any names, but he has an interesting voice-to-skull experience where it's not just one person berating him all day long. It's usually done in a group of 2 or even 3 people, and it just constantly saying, don't do that. You're an idiot. You're fat. You're stupid. Just constantly all day long. It's hard for me to imagine. I don't have the voice to skull, but it's hard for me to imagine how someone can put up with this constantly, and yet there are people that have struggled through this and tried to maintain some normalcy in their life. This particular person, on regular intervals, while he's being berated, suddenly they'll stop and say, room, attention, and then you'll hear a different voice say, at ease, man, at ease. And then they go back to what they were doing. And he tells me these are American voices. This is clearly being done from a military facility, and these are clearly military people. And this has happened often enough and suddenly enough that clearly the men in the room were not prepared for it. So this is reinforcement of our idea that the voice to skull and these microwave weapons are controlled from Schriever Space Force Base in Colorado. So I just wanted to throw that in as an additional piece of evidence that we've been able to gather that most people aren't aware of.
That's great, Richard. That's absolutely great. Thank you, sir. I'm aware now that there is such a deep link between the military and the medical and the corporations. They're all feeding into each other, really, on a very high level.
Yes, we have people, I believe, this is a theory, I believe many people have access to this device. As you mentioned, Dr. Frey, earlier, since 1975, this was published in the American Psychologist, the works that were done, along with the grant and the grant number. And it was Department of Veterans Affairs. And it was also, the Department of Human Affairs. So those are the two people or entities that actually funded this V2K project that was published in 1975. The work occurred in 1974. All right, go ahead. I know somebody wanted to speak, so that's why I said go ahead.
And I'm good. Thank you for sharing that, Frank. Every bit of information helps us understand this multi-spectrum attack upon the human physiology and brain at this time. The human genome, the right to mental freedom and privacy. These are the upshots of where we're going, a complete control system. There's no getting away from it,
Yes,
but,
there is.
We need evidence.
Go ahead.
Please continue. No, please continue.
We have got 15 minutes left, so I'd like to let everyone make extensive closing thoughts for the community, something for them to look for, something for them to look up to. And I think that's targeted justice already. And I think you both have done a fantastic job today. But we have 8 o'clock roaring up at us. If we want to continue past 8, we can. That is up to the content that you have left to exhibit. But go ahead.
I'll jump right in, Frank. This is Richard Lighthouse. I want to encourage people to join a group. I can't overstate this because we found a huge difference between the people that continue to isolate themselves and the ones that join a group. I would say the morale improves, the connections improve. Typically, when we have meetings in Houston, we get anywhere from maybe 7 or 8 people up to, we've had as many as 23 people show up on a nice sunny day once a month. So it is possible. Houston isn't the biggest city in the country, but this is possible in any large city in the country. We encourage you to reach out. We've got a list of contacts and organizations on our website. Other groups. We're not the only TI group out there. There's lots of other TI groups. Reach out. There's folks on Facebook. There's a book that an ebook that's free that's at the bottom of the homepage on targetedjustice.com that's called Targeted Individuals Technical Information. And in that book is a list of hundreds of TI contacts all over the United States, and some are international. There are people that have volunteered to give their email address and phone number that you can call or contact, say, hey, can we meet for a cup of coffee? You know, I'm so-and-so. I'm not a perp. I'll bring friends with me, or you can bring friends with you. We'll meet at the coffee shop. I'd just like to chat for a few minutes, and maybe we could start a group. What we've found is the perps stay away from these groups because they're really easy to identify. So we've been carrying on meetings now for almost 3 years, and we found that the perps just don't show up. So if you've got concerns about that, we can tell you from our own personal experience, they're not going to come to your meeting because every TI has built that sort of intuitive radar. They can pick one out, just like a black sheep in a crowd. And so we encourage you to join a group. You're not going to solve this by yourself. On Targeted Justice website, we've got more than 200 cases under our legal section of people that have tried to sue the government and stop this by themselves. And it just doesn't work. We've got 200 examples where it just doesn't work. And there's lots of reasons for that. I'm not going to oversimplify it, but the fact of the matter is the deep state doesn't like to deal with groups. And so they're going to try to divide you and isolate you. They're going to break up your relationships. They don't want you being in a group. And there's a good reason for that. It's because you're effective in a group. So get into a group, contact your senators and congressmen, get names and phone numbers, and have people that can back you up. If you get arrested or charged with a ridiculous crime or setup, you've got people that can back you up. That's a smart thing to do. You want to have some backup. So, Targeted Individuals Technical Information. It's a free ebook at the bottom of targetedjustice.com on the homepage. You can download. There's about 30 books there. They're all free. Everything on the Targeted Justice website is free. You could copy it, paste it on your own website or Facebook page. We are now on Gab and Parler and Minds and Rumble and BitChute. Lots of alternative media. I encourage you to connect with people and don't isolate yourself. That's one of the worst things you can do is isolate yourself. So that's my closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Len, do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, I do. I very much mirror what Richard had to say. I absolutely on the same page. Connect, talk about, come out as a target individual. I can tell you that I told everybody that I know, my friends, all my coworkers, whether they giggle behind my back or not. We have thick skin. All targets are. If you didn't have thick skin, you would have been dead by now. You would have committed suicide, or just because it is impossible. The technology is so strong that it is you are really not in control. And so a part of my personal strategy is I accepted it, but I didn't accept the that it's some kind of just thing to do. I just accepted that I cannot change anything about it, but I will be vocal. I shared my interviews, the information with literally everybody I meet. Because ultimately, when you speak in the truth, it doesn't matter what other people think of you. People will follow authenticity, and I am being authentic about what's happening to me. You don't believe it. You don't understand it. You underestimate the possibility of the technology. You question all these questions. They're valuable. They're very valuable questions to answer, but you cannot deny reality, and we have evidence, and that's reality. So share it with everybody. Don't be disappointed that people don't believe you. Spread the word that this is reality. I'm about to receive this report on my QEEG. I will make it public. I want people to see what kind of severe brain damage this technology causes. And I'm just not going to be silent about it. I have not been given a choice. The choice would be to go down silent or to fight it. And in order to fight it, you need to talk about it. So I encourage everybody to speak up about it. Tell your truth. Show your evidence. And I hope that it will become a political issue at some point, because general public is affected. And who is general public? It's us. It's the voters. We put people in the office. So let's not put another elected official who does not want to protect general public from newer weapons. That would be my closing statement. Thank you.
Very good. Can you guys hear me over there?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to check because I am not part of the studio at this point in time, so I'm just lucky. But for my Sasha, would you like to give your closing statement? Sasha? Oh boy.
Please excuse me, Frank. I just had to accept the delivery. I'm right here. Hello?
Okay. No, that's fine. I would like to say for my closing statement, my dream has been to unite this country, all of the targeted individuals. And I think that we can make that come true. All we have to do is accept some people in the community leaders for who they are and what they've done, and don't judge anybody because it's not up to us. Thank you.
I agree.
Okay, I guess.
That's a very wise statement.
I would like to take us out. And God bless you all. God bless TIs all over the world. Good night from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen.
Allegiance to the flag.